Hi, everyone. Welcome to Round the Table, a Planetary Classroom Beyond the 2D frame. We are now in the main campus of UCL, the iconic Portico. And this is a series of experimental VR roundtable events bringing together educators, students, and software groups who are working and learning interdisciplinarily between the virtual and the physical. So we will be discussing the future of our education and the tools that interface us. We're the organizer of the event. I am Professor currently teaching at the Bartlett School of Architecture.
And well, I'm Alberto Fernandez, teaching as well at the Bartlett School, current PhD candidate as well here, and professor in the University of Chile. From the lesson that we have learned in the past years, can we imagine a more sustainable, inclusive, interactive, and accessible education environment that help us to communicate in a better way beyond the 2D frame? It's a good question. Most importantly, how would this shift bring changes to our urban environment and the way in which we are distributing tasks between the virtual and physical? The idea of global virtual, local, physical suggests us a search in which we can share this idea of a planetary scale beyond the disciplinary and geographical borders.
Yeah, so each event we have a different sub-theme for the roundtable. Today we will be discussing decentralized education, peer-to-peer learning. So how can traditional means of education be disrupted and diversified, and should it? Most importantly, the role of immersive tools and digital technologies will be discussed. So we will be pondering on how we may distribute educational tasks between the virtual and the physical.
And well, before we start, we would like to give our sincere thanks to all our guests who contribute to this effort, time and financial knowledge. We are also very grateful to this year's Research Lead Initiative Award, which is supporting us and funded this event. We will start the event with an opening talk by our dear Professor Mario Carpel, who is here in the front of us. and as well, after Mario, we are going to have a 40 minutes round table with our guests. The event will last a total of 2.5 hours, hopefully.
Yeah, so without further delay, let me introduce Professor Mari Carpel. So Mari Carpel is an architectural historian and critic, and is currently the inaugural Rainer Banham Professor of Architectural History and Theory at the Bartlett UCL. His areas of specialization includes the history of architectural theory and the history of cultural technologies, with a focus on the classical tradition and on digital design theory. In particular, the early modern period from Vitruvian tradition and the Italian Renaissance through to the theory and criticism of contemporary architecture from the 1990s to the present. So Mario is the author of many publications. His most notable ones include The Second Digital Turn, published with MIT Press in 2017. Mario holds a Doctor of Architecture from the University of Florence, a PhD of History from the European University Institute, and an HDR of Art History from France. So let us welcome Professor Mario Carpel to the stage.
Yes, if I manage to get there. So
yes, take your time. There's no rush.
Now I turn.
Yeah.
Here. And I step back.
Yeah, and then to the left.
I am at the podium, right?
Yes, and a little bit in the front, to the front now. A little bit to the front.
Almost. If you take one step, yeah.
One step
in the front. Yep.
And forward.
Forward.
Am I in the right position?
Yes.
It's like, yeah.
Perfect.
Exactly. You can talk.
What do I look like?
You look like you.
Amazing.
Yes.
That's a good idea, because I don't see my avatar, but I assume you see me. Well, good. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to Alberto and Provides for organizing this experiment. So my role today is to say a couple of words to introduce the topic of the day, which is the, how did you call it, the planetary classroom, which half a century ago we might have called the global classroom or the virtual classroom. So in a nutshell, since the beginning of the digital turn in the 90s, we have been suggesting, arguing, claiming, in fact, screaming until we were blue in the mouth that digital mass customization is better, cheaper, faster, smarter, more environmentally sustainable than the mechanical mass production of industrial standardized goods. And since some in this room are my students, you have heard this story many times, so I shall not repeat it. But we have also been arguing that the electronic transmission of information is better, cheaper, faster, smarter, and more environmentally sustainable than the mechanical transportation of people and goods. So, for example, if you want to meet someone in New York, the good thing to do is to make a phone call, electronic transmission. The bad thing to do is to take the plane, go there, and come back, because that it is not smart at all. It's a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of energy, a waste of heat, a waste of fossil fuel, a waste of CO2, ozone, etc., etc. So one thing is good, the other is bad. This doesn't look like rocket science. It's just a truism. It's immediately evident. It's not even a very new idea, because this idea that the transmission of information is better than the mechanical transportation of people and goods has been around for 5 years. It started with the invention of alphabetic writing, because writing, alphabetical or even non-alphabetical for that matter, is the way to record the voice of a person who's speaking, so we can hear that voice even if the person is not there. So we can eliminate the obligation of physical presence face-to-face thanks to a technology which records what the person has to say. So we can hear her voice even if the person is not here, far away in space, another continent, or in time. She died in 25 centuries ago. So, for example, at the very beginning of Western thought, Socrates, the Greek philosopher, he didn't write a line. He was talking, that was called dialogues, and the only way to know what he was saying was to go and speak with him face to face. But that was not very cost effective, as we would say today. So one generation later, a gifted student of his, certain Plato, I've heard the name, decided that he should write down and write Socrates' dialogues so people could read what he had said, even if they didn't speak with him face to face, which is why we can still read today Socrates' dialogues, even if we have never met him, because he died 25 centuries ago. Another example, which has some importance in the history of global civilization, is, for example, the case of Jesus Christ. You may have heard the name. He made miracles. He walked on water, healed the cripples, turned water into wine, and multiplied fish and bread. But he never wrote a line. He never wrote a line. He was just speaking. The only way to listen to him was to be at the same place in the same time when he was speaking. Otherwise, you would never know what he was saying. So fortunately, some among his followers, called the evangelists, at some point wrote down some of his famous speeches, and they translated them, which is why we can still listen to Jesus Christ's voice, even though we never met him face to face. This is the miracle of writing, the transmission of information in the absence of the person who was speaking. The technology of the time evidently kept improving. In the 15th century came print with movable types, so you could print text faster and cheaper. In the 19th century, we had telegraph, so we could transmit alphabetical writing, notations, at the speed of electricity, which is almost the speed of light. And then a few years later came the telephone. So you can transmit the voice of a speaker without having to notate it, just as it is. And then came wireless with Marconi, radio, and then television. And in the 1960s, a Canadian philosopher, Marshall McLuhan, argued that we are all living in the same village, thanks to electronic communication. We call it the global village. That was 1962. And then in the 90s, the internet came. And with the internet, the amount of things we can take out of physical space and transform into the transmission of pure electronic information was multiplied many times. In 1995, one of the first interpreters of the internet, an MIT professor called William Mitchell, he's dead now, but he was a good guy. He wrote a little book, which you can still read online, called City of Bits. That was 1995, where he explained, and mind you, in 1995, the internet was just a newborn. People didn't even call it the internet yet. They call it the information superhighway or the infobahn. But he explained that with the internet, so many things which we used to do in physical space, we're going to migrate in cyberspace. We don't use that expression anymore, but in the 90s, it meant the electronic space of the internet. So Mitchell tells this story. You go out in the morning and you buy a newspaper at the newspaper kiosk. Yes, but soon you will not buy the newspaper, you will read it online. The bank, you go to the bank to transact something, but money is pure information. It will be transacted online banking. People said, it's never going to happen. Yes, but when it happens, we shall not need but retail branch bank at the corner of the street. Nobody will go there anymore because you will do that online. Travel agent. Who will need a travel agent when you can book a ticket online? The post office. Soon we shall not need the post office because we shall have email. Email, what is that? Wait and see. And then you will go in a store, you will buy a CD, but soon you will not need to buy a CD because there will be a universal archive. Every music which was ever recorded available on the internet, you can download it. You said it's never going to happen, but it did happen. Only 3 years later, it was called Napsters. It was illegal, but the technology was fine and it worked well. And then Mitchell went on and said, you're a student, you go to the library. Why would you go to the library? The catalog of the library is already online, and soon every book will be online too. So you will not need to go to the library to read it. You can read it from your couch. You go to work, but soon you can work from home. It's never going to happen because people like going to work. That's fun. It likes, traveling 3 hours on the tube to go to work in the morning, 3 hours in the evening. That's fun. We all like to do that. And then, of course, we go to school to learn, and soon there will be virtual classrooms where you can do pretty much the things you do in a physical classroom without having to go there from wherever you are. And people said, it's never going to happen. People don't like it, it's never going to work. But we now know that it did work. Nothing happened in the 90s. There were experiments as of the early 90s. Virtual classrooms were organized as of 1993, but they never caught on because people thought it was not a good idea, it was clunky, it wouldn't work. It did work. It worked, as you all know, in March 2020. In the space of 5 days, almost every university class in Europe and in America went online. In my case, on Friday, I was at school, and on Wednesday, I was on Zoom. I learned to use Zoom in the space of a weekend. And now we know that it does work. We can make it work. Now, I don't mean it is fun. Often it ain't. Sometimes it is a real pain in the neck, but we know we can make it work. It is possible, and sometimes it is even necessary. So let's look back at what we have been doing for the last 15 months. Do we really need to be all together in the same classroom to learn mathematics or to learn history? Probably not. Even for the studio environment, which is so important in a school of architecture, do we really need to be all together to hold hands, to sing songs, and to dance in circles, to animate the studio? Do we need to do that? After all, what we have learned during the pandemic is that in a studio, we do what we do in professional life. We put digital notation on a screen. Do we need to be in physical space to hold hand with someone else to do that? And to be honest, there is the Venice Biennale open right now. We all need to travel to Venice to go inside the Biennale to see an installation which is often a digital screen, which we could see from our sofa. And then all that is made in the installation has an ephemeral life of 3 months. After 3 months, it will be destroyed, dismantled, all the timber burnt, and all that work will be wasted. Is that sustainable? Now, just a footnote. You may remember that 2 years ago, before the pandemic came, Greta Thunberg, you remember her, right? She's still around, I think. She traveled all the way by train to Rome to meet the Pope, and it took her 7 days. And then she had to give a talk to the General Assembly of the United Nations. So she traveled by sailing boats from Europe to New York and back. 15 days to go and 10 days to come back because the wind is more favorable coming back. But Christopher Columbus already knew that. That was a lot of time to do that. Now, to conclude, let me tell you just a little secret between you and me. We are not going to say that outside this room. It's confidential, just between you and me and the lamppost. The real alternative to air travel, which we all know is unsustainable, the alternative to air travel is not sailboat travel. It's probably Zoom. It's probably Zoom. Don't tell it to anyone, but that's probably the way to go. Zoom or this wacky alternative or upgrade to Zoom that our two friends, Provides and Alberto, are experimenting with today. So thanks to this, we can probably avoid sailing boat travel. So thank you and good luck and keep up the good work. Now I'm going to step back and listen to you, right?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor, for this beautiful history of this theory and the introduction of for our event. Well, next we have a guest from EPFL, Lucia Jabón Oyarsun. Lucia is an architect and researcher. She's graduated from the ETSAM, School of Architecture of Madrid, where she also obtained a master in advanced architectural projects and defended her PhD exception and the rebel body, the political as generator of a minor architecture in 2017. Since 2010, she was a researcher at the Cultural Landscape Research Group at the University Politécnica de Madrid. And since 2019, she's a postdoc and head of research at ALICE, Atelier de la Concepción del Space, at the same institution. Darío, are you here? Yes. Darío Negorela del Castillo is scientific and operational coordinator of the Center of Digital Visual Studies, Max Planck and University of Zurich, since January 2020. Between 2017 and 2019, he was a head of research at Alice Lab in EPFL, where he completed his PhD named The City of Extended Emotions in 2017. He recently organized the 2021 Deep City International Symposium, as well as the Scaffold Open Encounters in 2018 in Brussels. His research spans architecture, urbanism, affective science, and spatial and visual perception with emphasis on imagination and spatial agency. Let us welcome to our guest to the stage. Come here.
You see it? You will be seeing yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
But
you see now, I guess, the
yes.
platform of Deep City. So I will start. We will do the presentation between two. All of course, thanks to Providis and Alberto for the kind invitation. It's quite nice to be among such a panel. And so we come today to talk to you about the Deep City. which was a scientific conference that took place on March 2021 through a soon-to-be, we expect, plug-and-play modular tool for hybrid conferencing. This platform was designed to augment the physical experience of scientific events while extending also the digital through a smart use of the spatial and embodied realm. You can see here its web interface, and we'll be showing you around it through the presentation.
So hello everybody. I continue a little bit. We'll be doing the presentation a little bit, two voices. I hope it's fine for everybody. So talking about the Deep City. So it was a conference on how big data, smart system, machine learning, and all of these new technologies are inevitably changing the way we study, we build and manage our cities. So we wanted, with this conference, to consider this transformation along the resurgent interest in political concerns and contributive action, making one of the key questions whether the opposition of machine intelligence and democracy is inevitable, or if there are shared trajectories between them possible. Deemed to take place in November 2020, the planning got obviously derailed by the COVID-19 pandemic. So given our interest in considering how our living environment is becoming threaded and molded by information, we considered it as an opportunity to develop an experimental tool dealing with that entanglement and how it could foster the forms of global dialogue the pandemics was bringing forward at the time, conferences online as well, all around.
So we thought that our interactions in the physical world are deeply different from those on the digital world, even though they can have and are influencing each other, creating a mixed reality. We thought that there was a potential to be explored in that difference. For instance, our ways of orienting ourselves is not the same in an embodied physical frame than within a screen. And that difference is interesting, and we think it's fertile. So our goal was to try to combine the best of both worlds, at least the best at our disposal with the uncertainty surrounding COVID restrictions and also a limited budget. And we wanted to create a tool that would not only augment the physical experience through a shared virtual space, but also expand the possibilities of that digital space through a singular use of the spatial and the embodied.
And in collaboration with the computer engineer Gordon Savicic from the Lausanne-based company Computed By, we started to plan and organize this interface and hub. Here we actually can show you the Miro board where researchers...
Sorry, I don't have it loaded because I had problems with the Miro.
No problem. So basically in the platform, there is a map and there is a wall, and then we will be seeing this this way of navigating between these two modes. And on a Miro board, researchers from ALICE and LDM, both and laboratories at EPFL in Lausanne, were collaborating already, doing the planning of the event, the planning of the platform, and so on. So of course there were many issues about collage and fragmentation of screens. There was also certain issues about how certain informational overlapping on the Windows screen may provide difficulties for concentrating and the effects that could travel from the digital to the physical. Or for example, on the centrality of a table in the embodiment of a shared act of speech, as well as the symbolic role of the map to locate and also dislocate our possessions, to open up other affective realms, etc., etc.
So all these considerations that we shared between the labs and with the computer engineers ended up in this platform map, and also the timeline that we have here below, a program that can be accessed through the sidebar, etc. People could explore, listen, and discuss in the different tables, the conferences, the different activities. So, for instance, if we start with this map, the idea was for it not to be like a representation, not to specific locations, but more like the overlapping realities, content, relations between the different content. So we had here all the abstracts presented into the conference. You could access to their information through this map. They were bound together by thematic affinities, but also if you were to navigate with the timeline throughout the 3 days, you would start to see the different events appear. So you could go to Thursday and you would have different events, a workshop, you would have a paper session, you would have another project showcase, then later on it would be a debate. So this map had the to try this kind of space where we could all be together without it needing to be like a mimetic representation of the real. And also we had here the possibility of changing all the hours of the event into your time zone. So if you are in Buenos Aires, you would have the times according to your experience. So it was a way of trying to approach these different time zones by making it just like a technical issue. Okay, the time question is just a technical issue. We can overcome it by creating a space where we are all going to be able to share it without having to create additions of it's plus 3 hours, minus 3 hours, things like that. No? Then we can show you, maybe Dario, you can explain how the different activities worked.
Yes. So, for example, we would go into an example of an activity. It was a roundtable discussion, and of course, in this platform, what you would do by clicking on the activity, you would see, of course, a video of streaming, and you would also see a video of that was kind of capturing the stage, the physical stage at the Rolex Learning Center in Lausanne, where we were also connecting live. So in that stage, we would actually have different screens that would be set up around a table. And we'd be sharing that common space with people connecting from different places, and all of that would be somehow be edited live and be presented through this platform. So you could access in different little widgets, you could access those videos, you could also access the abstracts of the talks and the contributions that were given, so on and so forth.
So in that way, the platform became an archive also of its own happening, because everything was post-produced along the way. We haven't touched anything. No? And finally, there was this second part of the platform, which linked to the exhibition. Yeah, I let you explain it, Dario.
Yes. So, and this was this other main mode of navigation, if you may, or main environment, which was first was this map, and then there was this wall, and of course this took, even though it's not incredibly relevant now, but this took somehow inspiration in some famous and notorious walls, as democracy walls in China and so on, where democratic expression and dialogue was trying to make their way through these kind of tools. And basically, we wanted to bring this as a bit of a metaphor, but also as a tool, precisely for enhancing dialogue in this kind of hybrid conference, and not trying to make the most out of, for example, a growing knowledge that or the possibility to converse, to talk, to share, to have discussions around the kind of materials and contributions that everybody brings to the conference. So in that wall, it started as an exhibition of contributions, and then it was turned during the time of the conference into a dialogue through the introduction of a very simple set of rules for adding comments and linking different types of content. So this is intended to be a tool that is not just a repository of a given event, but a kind of a repository of ongoing conversation that we hope to keep going.
I'm sorry that it isn't loading super well, but this big Miro board and the Mozilla hubs, it's just breaking my computer. So
no, it's working really well.
I can seem to go back to the because I've lost the. Usually you would be able to come back if it was working without this kind of delay to the Deep City.
And basically, just perhaps to conclude, just a couple of words of course, the kind of things that this platform is not, but we would like it to be. So we are really interested in trying to augment the functionalities of this platform and trying to bring in, for example, technologies of the semantic web, types of semantic search, and so on, to try to make it kind of smarter and more useful for the actual navigation of that content afterwards. You know, we see already has quite a lot of things, and already takes some time to navigate it, which we think it's also fine. The diving into that environment is also an important aspect of it, but we hope to bring it up to date with emerging technologies, so that we can really properly include data, different types of data, and enhance the interoperability of the platform.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucia and Dario, for your presentation. Yeah, the Deep City conference, the interface is really amazing. I mean, that's also how I met Lucia and Dario, because I was presenting at the conference, and I was so surprised by the hybrid physical virtual setup that I think now we may begin to call it digital. So thank you so much again. And without further delay, we will begin the second picture kucha by Adam from CHK. But in order to do that, we have to move to his customized room. So if you may follow me, we will travel to that room right now.
Let's follow provides.
Where's she going?
Yeah, so here is the link to the second room. Just press it and enter.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Welcome to my office.
Sorry, wait, I have to introduce you first because you're our guest. So, yeah. So welcome, Adam. Adam is currently an assistant professor and researcher in architecture at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, CUHK, with a teaching and research focus on computation, fabrication, and construction systems. So he received his Master of Architecture from University of California, Los Angeles, and his Bachelor of Architecture from the Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. He teaches graduate level design studios, undergraduate lectures, and electives across both streams in computational design and architectural technology. So thank you, Adam, also for customizing this VR space. Yeah, in your office.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm actually physically in this space as well right now. Thank you very much, Provides, for inviting me. This is a very interesting experience, and very much in line with a lot of my interests. So yes, I do have a background in computer science, also an obsessively analog architecture degree and an obsessively digital architecture degree. I guess the other thing that I should mention was the Cadria conference this year that I was one of the organizers of, along with Christoph Krola and Jeroen Panameda. And we had originally organized and got it funded to be an in-person event, and probably some of you would have attended. Unfortunately, during that period between the granting of the rather amazing amount of money and the time that it happened, we had to switch slowly as our hearts broke to an online conference. And there were many benefits to this and a few drawbacks, mostly in terms of the ability to be with people physically and all the kind of soft benefits. But that really was an amazing conference. Many keynotes, roundtables, physical tours of Hong Kong that were conducted by our students, over 150 papers, all presented through the wonderful Zoom platform, streamed to Vimeo, even through mainland China as well. A few things I would say about my research. One of the impacts I'd say about COVID and some of the social conditions that happened in Hong Kong were that it put a kind of slowdown or halt on some of my research activities. In particular, I had some projects going on involving cable robotics and masonry construction and automation with a partnership that I have with robotic engineers. And it forced me, whether I kind of liked it or not, to try and find interest, funding in teaching as well. How could I quickly jump onto the technological bandwagon to get money and tech and goodies for my students to conduct more immersive versions of teaching online? I think what I have to say is that I kind of dispute the idea that Zoom has solved everything. And I guess that's really the starting point for where I'm going with things into the future. I know that e-learning has solved many problems, but it is primarily used as a communication tool. And where I'm reaching further is in a kind of learning that's called haptic learning or hands-on learning, which has been less successful, I would say, certainly in the wake of COVID, but generally speaking, it hasn't been adopted that well. So in the context of architecture, for example, we still invest a lot of time and energy into craftsmanship, how we use our hands, how we feel for assembly of materials and so on. And a lot of that immediately got lost. And it got me thinking quite a bit about how we can, I don't know, watch Food Networks and watch people dance on television. And we could become incredible critics of somebody's performance online, but it doesn't give us the haptic knowledge, the ability to develop our own dance skills or our own knife skills in the kitchen. Without that experience, the act of making or touching or doing, there is a kind of sensorial loss that happens at the same time. So that has been one of the things that I've been focusing on in the last maybe 1 or 2 years here in Hong Kong, is trying to find these gaps in online or e-learning platforms and try and look for new ways to bridge those gaps as well. One of the things that was developed was this kind of framework of scan, design, and build. Those three kind of categories that I've been able to break down further explorations into other things. Firstly, in terms of scanning, we're really talking about the digitization of material and information and data and collecting it. So it could be as basic and traditional as our students observing things. They go out into the world and they sketch buildings, they draw stuff, they do life drawing, but also more contemporary versions of it. Maybe it's LiDAR scanning, maybe it's 3D scanning. Through that, I've been able to obtain, of course, through support of the government and our school, 3D scanners that students were able to sign out entirely. They could bring one home to their apartment and use their kitchens as the kind of studio laboratory, for example. They could scan a piece of broccoli, almost like a found object, and start to incorporate those things into their design activities. And then they'd have to bring it back after a couple of days and another student would use it. But I was able to get enough. Similarly, in the design category, I've been able to bring in a lot of VR equipment as well, so students can communicate, develop their abstractions and their simulations and modify work, all of course connected to standard architectural tools like Rhino, Grasshopper, BIM tools like Dynamo and Revit, not that I support those so much, and synthesize their work, presenting it online as well. And I think the making and building component is much, much harder. In this case, one thing that we've been lucky about in Hong Kong is our access to inexpensive delivery of 3D printing, mostly across the border. So many of my students would simply email their work and it would arrive at their door in a couple days in super high resolution and not so expensive. But we also have that kind of stuff here as well. But to systematize it in that fashion has been very interesting. One kind of other component that I would add is that the impact of what's happened has had many negative components to students as well. Not only, so I guess the way I would frame it is that the university has made it clear that student performance hasn't necessarily excelled in an e-learning and a Zoom context. Although it's more convenient and more streamlined generally, there's a sentiment of isolation that's happening as well that is not something that we've really considered as supporters of e-learning and technology, that students really need to be in the space with each other. They need to be in the studio with each other for all of the soft reasons that have nothing to do with the design of their buildings or their investigations. So it's been an interesting balance. And actually this year, the university is not giving an option to us anymore. We're straight up face-to-face, no matter what. So I don't know if that's a setback for e-learning or not, but it's going to be an interesting couple of months to see how we transition back to face-to-face from exclusively Zoom courses. I have courses that I developed that were entirely on Zoom, and now I have to figure out ways to get people to come in person, for example. So yeah, that's, I'm not really going to point out any particular image or anything like that. I definitely force an ambidextrous attitude towards my student work and into their futures so that they think both digitally and non-digitally, I guess is the right word. And yeah, how's that provide?
Thank you so much. That was perfect. I was also showing your images along the way. So this digital, the perks of being like a VR space. Awesome. So thank you so much, Adam. Without further ado, let us move on to the next VR space. If you would just follow me. Yeah, big clap.
Let's follow clockwise. To the left or to the right?
Yeah. To the right. If you would just come outside of the room and then to the right.
Okay. And then?
Was that okay?
We are outside.
Yeah. We still have some time left, so if you guys want, you can take 2 minutes to look at the images.
So this is the campus, yes?
Hey, was that all right?
Yes, that was perfect.
Okay.
So the link is here.
Okay.
And this is the 360 video of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. This is the iconic landmark there. Cool. When you're ready, you can just jump into this link right here, right next to me.
It will be the last one. Provides like the.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes.
You're back.
Yes, finally.
But
Thank
Where are you?
you.
but it's
He's
Here.
here. Awesome. So let me
Lovely.
introduce you.
Yes.
Fishu Bhushan is a lead designer at Sahahati Architects, Competition and Design Research Group, Sahahati Code in London. He also teaches at the Architectural Computation and Architectural Design at the Bartlett Postgraduate Programs BPro at the UCL. He leads the design research on computational geometries with specific interest on structure and fabrication aware tectonics and the development of software agnostic computational frameworks to explore it. He has taught and presented at several institutes, international workshops, and professional CAD conferences. So let us welcome Fishu.
okay. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I try to create like a cyber physical space in terms with the theme of the presentation, and then I have put some key marks to. So if you press space, you will see people highlighting. You can click on the one on the right. It will teleport you to the first slide. So, or if you can just follow me.
Okay. Let's go.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the invite again. First, I'm part of the computation and design research group at the Zahadi Architects. We are a small research team within the office. We are about 15 people now, but it started in 2007 by Niels Fischer, Patrick Schumacher, and Chajay Bhushan. When it started off, it was much smaller. It was 3 to 4 people. The group was started to create project independent research, but at the same time mature the research onto application onto architectural projects, whilst at the same time also developed collaborators in the field of design and what we call as design technologies, uh, varying from computer graphics, mathematics, structural engineering, and more recently statistical learning, and blockchain technologies, etc. We have 3 to 4 strands of research within the group, of which I lead the architectural geometry strand, which kind of focuses on expressing geometries which are structurally feasible and also fabrication wise feasible, and trying to display the performance of these factors in the shape itself. The research kind of builds upon historic continuum. So it builds upon historical giants such as Felix Candela, Gaudi, Frei Otto, etc., but also borrows from other streams such as mathematics, computer graphics, game theories, and blockchain technologies. Moving on to the within the group, we have kind of 3 strands of research where we try to carry out our research. One is the first part is the academic part, where we kind of have our affiliations at the UCL Bartlett, but also affiliations at AA and ETH Zurich, where we try to see the research strand and try to gestate and iterate through the research. And then once the research matures, we also try to develop a bit more scientific and rigor into it through scientific and technology demonstrators within the office. These are small scale projects like pavilions, um, installations, etc. And then once the research matures and is good enough for wide scale application, we develop tools which can be used within the office for design, for fabrication, etc. In the presentation today, I'll be focusing more on the academic part, as continuing with the theme of the panel. Yeah, on the academic part, we try to we follow the theme of Joseph Albers of trying to learning by doing. It can be learning through digital spaces or digital tools, but also combining with physical things. So digitally, like over the last year, since everyone would have experienced after the pandemic, everything moved online. But the resource to learn digitally is quite vast and it's easy, and the students are able to pick up tools quite rapidly. And because of the wide, also the research being a lot of institutes making the research open source, there are custom platforms which are open, even geometry groups at ETH Zurich, MIT, at Toronto, they all made their tools open source, and also their classroom available for students to latch onto. So that made the digital part of, or the computational aspect to design, much more easier for students to learn, and they could actually take up modules in other institutes, which is something unique, which they were able to do as things went online. But I second on the part of the physical aspects previously mentioned in the previous talk, that the sense of tactile and building things is kind of lost. And in the first year of the pandemic, we were not able to do any of these physical installations with the students. But in as we are getting used to the digital side of things, we've also thought, okay, on this year at the Digital Futures and CAD Futures workshop, which is like a 10-day workshop online, we're kind of collaborating with people at University of Calgary in Canada, who had access to physical making. So the workshop was 10. We kind of opened it up in such a way that people interested on the digital side of things, only on the digital aspects and digital spaces, they were kind of logging on the Zoom side. But people who are interested on the physical side of making, because the university was in Calgary, a lot of people from there registered for the workshop. So it was a kind of a hybrid mix, and that's a skill I think like the students need to develop currently, is to bring up a focus, but also trying to say, if they're interested on the physical side of things, how they can communicate with people in different parts of the world and try to collaborate with them. So that would be an important skill to develop as well. Moving on, these were some images of the installation we did in a 10-day workshop, which is looking at timber and graphic statics. But we tend to do these kind of design build workshops all over the world, in India, Mexico, Brazil, and China. This was all pre-pandemic. Moving on, if I come to the booth, the video here kind of shows, if this one is playing. The video here, okay, I don't know if it is playing for you guys. Is it playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's working.
Yeah, it kind of showcases the technologies which I was kind of previously mentioning. So one is looking at game-based technologies to develop custom platforms. This was looking at housing blocks. So the user is able to come in and customize their user module or housing module using game technologies. But the same technologies we believe can be used in education, where the student is able to come and choose or customize their own choices of modules, which happens currently in multiple universities, but within the universities. But in an e-learning environment, it'll open up a vast array, like the student is able to create their own custom modules, which will be, I think, would lend itself to some interesting mix of collaborations and interdisciplinary aspects. Second aspect is on, like I think which will be important going forward, is to kind of borrow from different um, systems and blockchain systems, is to kind of build on existing tool sets. So that is what like any blockchain is kind of open source, so you can use the existing APIs and build your things on top of it. So this is very important, that the tools or the research becomes open source. Currently a lot of the research is on papers, but if the act was or some of the frameworks we are developing, we are trying to push it on open, make it open source, so the students can build on top of the same framework, so they don't need to invest on building the framework again. And it's all the research is not a black box, so you can actually know what's happening at the back end. And the third skill, I think, which we are all kind of discussing, would be like the students would need to develop a skill to make these kind of cyber physical spaces, which is like, that is kind of a new client. That is where I'm also heading towards on the architectural practice side. Like, we are getting a lot of new clients who are requesting for design of these cyber physical spaces. So that's this can be like a mobile gaming industry, like PUBG or other industries which are looking at these developing cyber physical spaces. But even though they are cyber physical, I think there is still validity in making them efficient, geometrically efficient, because the performance requirement on the browser is a different performance, but it's still valid to understand geometry, so it can be modified to suit the web or suit other means of visualization. Yeah, so on the moving forward, you can see on the right side of the things, these are some applications we are current, like all the technologies we kind of, or research which we have been doing over the last 5 to 6 years, kind of progressing from small scale chairs and pavilion kind of structures to large scale stadiums, metro stations, bridges, arenas. So like the research is kind of maturing quite rapidly now. So we can see over the last couple of years, the scale of projects is kind of actually increasing quite a bit. And one of the key areas where we feel all of these technologies in architectural geometry and game technologies are kind of coming together is in housing domain, or what we call specifically participatory housing domains. This is also an agenda we kind of push in our cluster at RCX, but has been in development at Code for 3 to 4 years, where we are trying to build custom platforms for stakeholder participations, not only end users, but also other stakeholders such as developers, fabricators, all interacting in the same platform. So overall, I think the research currently is at an exciting phase, and also adding an additional wing of cyber physical spaces is an exciting time for us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vishu.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful space, and I love how the materials are blending into the texture of the architecture.
Amazing presentation for the production.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, a lot of claps.
Yes, and where is the portal?
The link to the next space is right here.
Right here.
Right here.
That one.
Yes, this one. Because this space is photogrammetry, so it will take a little bit of time to load. Yeah. Just be a little bit patient, and you will see the main hall of BME Hungary University. Melinda, are you here?
Hi, hello, yeah. Hello, provides.
Hi, cool. Alberto is going to introduce you, so let's wait for him.
Thank you. Yeah, and wait for Charlotte, please. I think Shati is coming as well.
Awesome, no problem. Just let us know when you're ready. We have time.
Okay.
While we're waiting, maybe we can also talk about how we work in time marathons nowadays. Like, for instance, Melinda would be taking 200 pictures of her university campus and send it to me. And when I wake up in Hong Kong, I can put them in photogrammetry softwares, reconstruct them. And then I send a model back to Melinda when she wakes up. So
yeah, this was amazing. And thank you so much for all your help.
Yeah. And when Alberto wakes up, he would be doing all the texturing of the images into the space, and it becomes what we see now.
Yeah.
Alberto, are you here?
Well, I want to introduce our next guest, Melinda and Sarota. Melinda Bogner. She's an architect DLA candidate at the Budapest University of Technology and Economics Faculty of Architecture, and alumni of the Architecture and Digital Theory and RES at the Bartlett School of Architecture as well. Her interest includes digital theory, the architecture of information spaces, museums and libraries, and the holistic understanding of architectural space involving socio-economical effects. After her graduate studies, Melinda started work at one of the Hungary's public building design offices, HOSTI, specialized in heritage building protection. Through various tasks, implemented her conceptual knowledge in practicing daily BIM environment exerting architect. Well, Sarota Rath, on the other hand, she's an architect graduated from the Technical University of Budapest, with part of her graduate studies completed at the University of Technology and Economics of Budapest as an exchange student. With different mobility program scholarships, in the course of the previous years after her graduation, she gained professional experience in renowned Budapest-based architectural studios, mostly working on large-scale public building design. After being an invited consultant of the first year of design studios at the Department of Public Building Design for several years, Sarolta is now starting her doctoral studies as a BME as well. So welcome. You are free to present your work during the last year.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here and for this amazing setup and organization. And now we are standing at the BME Great Hall, where usually graduation ceremonies and semester openings are organized. As you've discussed it before, in this virtual environment, along with my colleague Melinda, we are exhibiting the 2D projections of our first-year students' classwork. We have found that first-year architecture students who have never received design training are a great representative study group to examine the influences of online teaching.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. So this past year of online education was super exciting year, and which we enjoyed so much that we would like to share with you some of our experience on analog online teaching. Our class might have been the most traditional among all the presented ones. Basically, we were not focusing on many particular design techniques or specific tool, but tried to introduce as many analog design materials to our first year architecture students as it was possible. So in the opposite wall of me, you can see 5 canvas with the students' first semester form studies. So please feel free to get a closer look to the exhibits while I'm speaking. And these models were made by paper, concrete, glue, or whatever the students found in their household. So this sounds almost old school, but they were asked to use simple modeling techniques like folding, cutting, extracting, and molding. And all of their works were made manually by hand. And they were also asked to respond to abstract notions and exclusively interpret those ideas by analog physical means, firstly as objects, then as spatial experiences. So for instance, they had to reinterpret light, contrast, connection, or certain feelings like calmness or excitement. So first-year architecture students without any design background are usually formulating their ideas based on everyday notation and with undisciplined formal expressions. Besides, they naturally use the digital tools for communicating their ideas. So in reality, the advent of online teaching for us educators had to rethink more consciously and to communicate more properly the design requirements. Because historically, architectural design has been dependent on aesthetics, proportion, and ratio. And this is what our training system tries to implant in the first 2 semesters with analog working methods. But during the pandemic, we experienced hybrid teaching, meaning in person for 2 months at the beginning, recording in progress, fully online meetings for 6+ months. And we were curious if online learning makes any difference in developing creative skills, but comparing the results of online teaching to previous traditional teaching, basically we see no difference in the materialized results. so the outputs of online students fulfill the same criteria as the peers and fellow colleagues. We mostly gave verbal instructions and feedback through the screen, which obviously had significantly larger scale of abstraction if we could sketch together. Then based on our blurry instructions, the students produced the 3D materials.
Usually graduation ceremonies and semester
Physical space. I can hear echoing something. Or
Yes.
is it fine now?
There is
Yes,
something.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Fine, thank you. Sorry, yes. So based on our instructions, they produced the 3D materials, physical spaces, which finally were evaluated in the 2D projections. So like photographs or 2D scans of the drawings. Thus we altered from 1D to 3D to back to 2D. And now we are exhibiting the works in this flat 3D. So probably it was less demanding for the students as it was for us.
openings are organized.
And if you can look around on a couple of snapshots, we can also see some in-person classes from the beginning of the semester when students were presenting their work in groups of 20 people. And as a result of remote teaching, in between discussions were replaced by reflections about the final material.
Mm-hmm.
And although many of us argues that there is a difference between face-to-face shared experiment of the materials and face-to-face discussions, organic drawings, swapping ideas of the formulating concept, in the online version there was no discussion during the process, only evaluating finished ideas, although the result does not differ, the experience does. So if we have a closer look to these triple groups of floor plans, sections, and physical 3D models, basically on my left, probably, in light of that, we can see these amazing first-year architecture students with no previous professional training were able to master design project with actually no real-time supervision. So because in our case, the continuous shifts between physical and digital resulted in a certain delay of the feedback, there were no simultaneous the impacts of online teaching on the current students' professional development. And all these triple groups of pictures, students' readers and 2D projections of their work, photographs. So the input and the output are computers in both times, but given the received instructions on screen, in between the tools were manual and sketches, drawings. It was possible because they knew this from in other environments, adapt them based on. But considering the limited amount of feedback, the students were not solely relying on our suggestions, but any available help, including endless opportunities of the internet, friends or relatives, whatever. But thank you so much. I don't know, Shatsi, if you are here, would you like to add something or conclude what's been said?
Well,
Shatsi?
Hear me? I'm here.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
yes, we can
Yes,
hear you.
so to conclude, I think we would all agree on that it was a unique and super stimulating experience for all of us. As instructors, we learned how to mediate students through verbal commands and in delayed times, while students experience more individual work and broader freedom of self-expression. Instead of showing models, the emphasis shifted towards verbal commands. In the online analog realm, design was based on rules instead of based on models. Thank you very much for your attention. And this was our first year students portfolio. Hope you enjoyed it. And now I guess see you at the next room.
Thank
you very
you. Thank you, Melinda, and thank you, Sarata. Thank you. Yes.
very nice production. Congratulations.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. So the link to the next room is just follow the pink carpet.
Yes, let's follow the pink carpet. Yes,
I'm not
Mario,
following you because I have to go to another meeting. So
okay. Thank you very much, Mario.
See you next time. Thank you.
Beautiful hugs from here. See you.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
So let's jump to the next one.
Yeah. The link is here, guys.
Yes, let's
See
follow
you
the
on the other
stairs.
side.
Stare at the ceiling. I don't know what's
Okay. I will start introducing you guys, I think. Awesome. So welcome everyone, and let us welcome Field Station Studio, which is a speculative design studio founded by Cornell and Michel, exploring the agency of emerging technologies through developing projects, conducting research, and teaching design studios. So this is a local node in the International Field Stations Network, fieldstation.net, which is based at the KU11 Faculty of Architecture and operates RC19 at the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL London. The collective work focuses on the agency of emerging phenomena and technologies and their impact on the cultures and practices of architecture and the environment in which we operate as designers. So let us welcome Cornell and Michel and their students of RC19.
Thank you, Provide.
All right. Thank you, Provide, for this introduction. So, as Provide said, we're mainly teaching studio University of Leuven, which is based in Belgium. In full pandemic, we were asked to a UD program of the Bartlett UCL. So early online, and we had tutors from China, London, Hong Kong, Sydney, and New York. We had our fair share of, let's say, microboards and Zoom grids and whatnot. So what we'll show today is a number of projects that kind of respond to this, let's say, online learning, but also this kind of saturation, let's say, of our environments with digital technologies. So to start the story, the place where we are standing is the former NSA spy station, which was built in Berlin after the Second World War. There's two reasons why we're standing here. One is that this is the where the field stations network that provides it was started. So it was initiated at this place by Christoph Barley, and we operated kind of a field lab here for a few years. The second reason is that obviously, I mean, the place has a really rich and interesting history. So it was the location where Albrecht Speer built the Nazi military engineering school. And after the war, the Allied forces wanted to destroy this structure, but they didn't have the resources to really do that. So basically, they decided to put all the rubble of the bombed Berlin on top of this structure. So creating an artificial hill. It's also located within one of the first protected forests of Germany. And then obviously after the war, Berlin became an island within the Soviet Union, right? So, so it became a really important location first for the British to build this spy station, and then so it was a former NSA station, and it's important for its role in kind of developing this world where electronic media and communication plays a vital role. Right? So it's for instance, one of the first emails was sent from this place. So in general, the field station network is interested in this notion of designing for a present mission and focusing mainly on the efficacy. It's a decentralized network where each node develops individual research as its own approach. We as Space Station Ghent or Space Station Belgium, we're mainly interested in, let's say, what we call the technosphere. It's the emergent planetary structure of technologies and how they interact with our disciplines of architecture. And can you guys hear me? Because I've got my
yes.
Okay. So I can't seem to move around anymore. So I'll just do the talk. And maybe you can sort of the work as we go along. Okay.
I'm just not sure if I move away further from you, I don't hear you anymore. So I propose you just do the talk and then we let people wander around a bit.
Okay, so I'll just do the talk and I'll briefly summarize what the works that you will see. So we're also, we're also joined by a few of our students from the RC19 research cluster at Bartlett, that developed a project that really speculated on, let's say, the potential of online learning, gamification, and that is the large video that you will see in the background. So mainly, it's really hard to. Field station, you could say, in a way, started from a sort of beyond to this filming already, right? We basically shifted our attention from medium for designing and building architecture to, let's say, the spatial impact of technology or in what we call this kind of hyper-saturated media ecology. Several projects really address this in different ways, but generally we like to, we also believe that there is a vital role still for the physical and for really visiting sites like this one where this kind of technological layer manifests itself. It's really interesting. Where does this technology impact on environmental probably we like to take cute kind of these places where we see those GCs. Obviously, this wasn't really possible anymore during the pandemic. So there are a few projects that are doing all on master studio on other eyes or algorithm vision, and they really try to address the kind of how is technology looking back at the world. What are the kind of visual languages and what is the potential for architecture to engage with this media? So there is one project called Lessons, which is the wide that really talks about kind of the erosion of this central notions of architecture, the notion of space, the notion of space, and how this kind of always online, always connected environment in which we work that kind of erodes those ideas into romance and how they not only live their lives but also how they present their identities online. The project next to that is very much kind of dissecting the world like the one we're in right now. So it's starting to learn from VRChat. VRChat is an environment not unlike this one, like where people can build rooms. And so she basically inspired us learning from Las Vegas to this kind of deep dive into those worlds. And really try to understand how this medium, which is often designed not by architects, but just are afforded this way of building their own environments. How can we understand this architecture, or the kind of tectonics of those online spaces, and she translated this into this architecture as worlds. And the sphere ones that you see, there are a project called Synopov. There are a Polish exchange student that was really involved in the street protests that were happening in Poland around the fascist government, fascist right-wing government proposing this very strict abortion laws, and she basically she was an exchange student in Belgium, so she was kind of disconnected from it, experiencing this vivid connection with through this kind of filters of online media and Instagram and live streaming videos. So she basically tried to map the kind of let's say online footprint of such an event, and try to kind of see the kind of intersection. But then so she basically first did this research from her own studio in Ghent, but then she went back to Poland to kind of join the protests, and it was all about this kind of this overlap between being inside and outside the protest, and then what does the mediation do with this kind of reading of the urban space of Warsaw. And I think the main video, Michiel?
No, sorry, maybe I misunderstood you. You wanted me to take over for the projects because you're not moving, or you can't move, because maybe indeed it's a bit strange. Okay, well, so maybe you try to log in again, and I'll take the crowd a bit further and then we see when you pick on again, right?
Yes, exactly. This isn't working.
Yeah, this is a bit strange, maybe. So please follow me. Yeah. So the first slides here show a bit the idea of the network and how we operate. You can't hear me?
No,
do you hear me?
Hear you without problems.
Okay, sorry. And do you see the first video here, or is it also a black screen for you guys?
Yes.
For me, it's a black screen, the first one here.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see everything as well. It's running.
So, okay. Strangely, I can't see it, but okay, fine. So let me see. I'm not mistaken. I think this is the project that Cornel referred to. That is looking at the phenomenon of digital nomads, people traveling all around the world and looking for favorable spaces to live, both in terms of finance, economical reasons, but also climatical reasons and so forth, quality of life. The second project Cornel was addressing is the one next to it. Was a student that mapped out VR chat, which is, like he said, a very similar environment like this one. So it's called Starting to Learn from VR chat because it's the first attempt, I suppose. So she did it on several levels, both by experiencing it herself and looking for let's say specific overlaps between the virtual environment and physical environments, and how people seem to emulate these physical environments in the virtual worlds, like their rooms and so forth, like we do same here. But you also start, so in the middle you see one of the drawings, one attempt to approach this as an architect and to translate it into drawings to kind of capture the physical, well, the organization of it. Since it's obviously a very different approach than in the real world, she had several attempts in doing so. So here you see one where all the rooms that are that you could detect are overlapped. And she also scraped a lot of data related to it and to see or try to map out how it extends to other platforms like Instagram, Flickr, and so forth. Then the project of Veronica. So this was the first project was by Matthias, the Digital Nomads. The second project by Jana. If you follow me to the 3D spheres here, this is the project of Veronica. She graduated with us during the pandemic last year. And like Anna said, she was kind of stuck in a room in Ghent, in Belgium, whilst in her home country and hometown, big protests arose during the pandemic against, amongst others, well, a contested law against abortion. And she tried to capture it. So the big sphere, actually, this one, is a grab of her room while she was working on it, and you kind of see how she's mapping out the whole process. So capturing it through social media and trying to map it out and experience it to the fullest. But then, as soon as there was a little opening, she also went there, and she could experience parts of it herself, which changed her point of view. And so she also attempted to capture all the data that she gathered and map it back onto 3D models of the city and the environments where it happened. As you can see in the other spheres, it's kind of mapped back on it and reconstructing the events.
So hi, Michiel. I'm back.
Cornel. So I actually, so the next project would be the project of the students that are working with us right now in RC 19 at the Bartlett, which is Group C. The students are also present here today. It's Hua, Sylvia, Cleo, and Yindi. So maybe Cornel, you can take over again, and we follow you. Can you move? Where are you?
Yeah. I'm good. I can move.
Okay. So,
yeah,
so,
I'm okay.
So it's the project here in front of, let's move to the big screen.
Yeah. So basically, the overall that we set out for RC19 was this notion of compression, again, as kind of a means of capturing not only this pandemic situation and how it kind of redefined or compressed a lot of things, let's say, in the home, but also as kind of a way to address data density or the compression, both as kind of a technical term, but also as kind of a designerly or architectural term. We have 4 groups, and each developed kind of a different approach to that topic, ranging again from the kind of visual cultures to the kind of material manifestations of this saturated world, through this group, which really looked at learning in this kind of hyper saturated environments, and in particular, they looked at their own kind of experience, being some of them in China and then traveling to London to come study at the Bartlett, and this kind of interfaces through which this happened. So they speculated on, let's say, a system for architectural learning, analyzing games like distributed within the city, where this kind of data layer of digital data becomes kind of informing architectural information. Also looking at the kind of mechanics or gamification that this would enable, and what role does an architectural institution play within this kind of augmented reality? One of the big inspirations for this project was this idea of a memory balance, where you basically, by spatial locating objects and artifacts around you, you kind of build memory and build knowledge. So they sort of envision an augmented reality version of this kind of memory balance. And as speculative media and using animation and videos kind of a way to address these questions. So the video that they made is kind of is basically giving you the sort of first person perspective of a user that would navigate London through this kind of augmented reality layer. I don't know, Michael, if you want to add something to that.
No, sorry. Was it a question to me?
Yeah, if you wanted to add something, but or the students if they want to. So maybe
let's go to the last project.
Yeah. So you didn't explain the Prometheus one, or did you?
Oh no, I didn't do the Prometheus one. Sorry.
Okay, so one thing that we are experimenting with in this kind of in the studio in general, but in this kind of online teaching is kind of how can we change the studio into kind of a different collaborative environment. And this Prometheus video that you see where Michiel is standing, it's basically the result of a 4-day workshop with 90 students. And this kind of digital media allow us to kind of collaborate in very, very different ways. So what we generally, if you would make a video, you would storyboard it and you would script it and you would build from the sort of large narrative down to the actual scenes and whatnot. In this case, we basically learned the students some photogrammetry tricks to their cameras or to the apps on their phones, and we basically send them out into the world to kind of scan where they saw this kind of interface between the physical and this technological layer. And then we basically, inspired by this Powers of 10 movie, we basically just collaged all those scans into an endless zooming out from sort of into the screen and then into the world and then into the interior, into the city, and sort of trying to question what these kind of scales are nowadays to this mediated environment. So I don't know how we are doing time-wise.
I think we take maybe a bit more time up. Yeah, so we can just maybe go to the last.
Because there was a technical difficulties. I think the next room might be a little bit too heavy given the circumstances. So if you may follow us to the next room here, the link is here.
In the main screen.
Where are you provides?
The link to the next room is here.
In the front of the bigger screen.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
This one.
Yeah, the room is here.
This thing is we are here.
Oh wow. Ah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, let me introduce you guys. So for the Rational Energy Architects REAR, which is an interdisciplinary and intercultural architect researcher collective based in Hong Kong, Jordan, Greece, London, Brazil, and Chile. So REAR is invested in using irrational numbers to rationalize energy use through architecture and urban design. So in the search for tools that fall between established fields of expertise, RIA collaborates with talents worldwide to test design production pipelines that synthesize different forms of intelligence. This results in their workshop series AI Inform, which integrates rule-based and machine learning systems for bio-inspired renewable designs. In the relentless effort of knowledge production and exchange, RIA have taught and presented at various ComicCat conferences, including CatDria, Cat Futures, Sagradi, Acadia, also Digital Futures, CCBDT, and many more. So let us welcome David and Nicole.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome.
Okay, so hi everyone. As Provide said, we are Rational Energy Architects, REAR, and welcome to our VR gallery. Here you can see all of our teaching work, basically. So we are a research collective that focuses on AI application in renewable designs, renewable energy designs, in particular, bio-inspired light harvesting in architecture. There are 5 of us in the team, and we are based in 5 different time zones from Hong Kong, Jordan, Greece, and Brazil. But our home base is UCL and the Bartlett School of Architecture. We'll be discussing today our experience as an open source collective in education. Our research project in solar designs resulted in a series of free online conference workshops from CADRIA to CAD Futures called AI Inform. The workshop focuses on developing distributed workflows and combinatorial pipelines that empowers participants with skill making. We consider ourselves part of the open source community for this reason, where we focus on peer-to-peer, data-to-data exchanges. And the challenges we see in the decentralizing architectural education comes in twofold. First, data sharing between software without proprietary constraints, and second, knowledge sharing between people without physical constraints. Our approach to these challenges on a technical level includes exploring the use of voxel as a universal data structure, which may enable us to preserve the integrity of data when it's being exchanged from different computational interfaces, including Houdini, Rhino and Grasshopper, to machine learning in custom Python frameworks. And this has the purpose of integrating various AI algorithms coming from sources that are both proprietary and open source. Of course, the task of building API between different softwares is an enterprise-grade R&D project. For instance, the Pixar engineered the Universal Scene Description, USD, as a framework for interchange of 3D computer graphics data to enable a collaborative interface between any software you can think of. And the logic behind USD is that it describes the aggregation and distribution of 3D assets in a scene to resolve proprietary constraints in all the softwares. Our approach with the voxel follows a similar logic that uses a set of data points as geometry proxies to encode XYZ and RGB data of architectural elements. The difference is that the method we use is based on distributed technologies that are readily available to any individuals pertaining to the spirit of the Creative Commons. In this way, students and participants who are fluent in different coding and modeling languages can communicate and speak to one another using the same structure of the voxel.
Cool. So now you follow me. If I make it. Awesome.
You're bumping into the walls.
Yes, it would have been better that by now.
Tell anyone that you can't navigate, and then, you know.
Oh my God. Okay, I can stand here now. So, yeah, I made it. So, hello from me as well. I thought that would be better too by now. So, hello from me as well. I'm Nicoletta. And following on from David, I would like to start and re-emphasize that a key aspect of our work is to think through alternative ways of using and harvesting energies within our cities. So the work that we do explores various strategies that might be implemented with a scientific basis, but also with a speculative attitude. So we are excited to think and speculate What could be a version of planetary civilization that can use and store all of the energy available on this planet, as suggested by Nikolai Carpel in 1964? So besides what we have large-scale infrastructure design that suggests a centralized system of light harvesting in remote areas, how can cities also contribute within the renewable capacities? So based on such questions, we began our search into decentralized light harvesting strategies. So in order to give incentive to individuals to participate in light harvesting, it is inevitable that the design of the solar devices also has to be participatory, as it has to fit the diverse solar conditions in urban context. So the overarching principles of the concept sits under the umbrella of participatory design, and it can be seen at various levels of exchanges, such as peer-to-peer collaboration, machine and environment symbiosis, and human and machine interactions. So within our workshops, we try to disseminate and enhance this way of working. We consider ourselves engaged in speculative designs that are non-fictional. So that means that the solar designs might not happen today, but we really hope that they will happen within 5 or 10 years with advancements of material technologies and fabrication technologies. So now let's talk a bit more about the process of teaching. As part of the process, we encourage students to look outside their field for interdisciplinary research and to dig deeper into understanding of technologies that will mature enough for mass customization within a decade. We believe it is very, very important, especially under the current climate crisis, to act and contribute creatively on ways of working with nature and data. But most importantly, the task of decentralization takes more than one collective to achieve. So it is very important to share knowledge and believes that in the futures, that individuals would have the chance to participate in renewable energy. Thus, promoting a model of decentralized education can be very beneficial given the urgency. It enables us to act quick, independent, and disseminate as much as possible. It also has been a very great and amazing learning experience working with our students as we get exposed and introduced to areas of the world that we wouldn't have been otherwise. We had students from East Asia to Eurasia to American continents, and each contributing their unique knowledge and solar data of their home context. And their diverse, and through that we learn diverse renewable strategies. Most importantly, every context has a local varying socioeconomic capacities and cultural technologies that we get exposed to and we learn more about it. For instance, one of our students introduced us to the porous terracotta water filters that are extremely economical to be implemented in less developed areas. Thus, pushing for local implementation of the brief and the participants' own critical variation of the pipeline enabled us to get a better understanding of various local climate issues and to get to know interesting biological species that, again, we wouldn't have been exposed to, which has been actually quite fun. And this is from us. We hope that that our sharing may provoke some more discussions on the relationships between decentralized application and education. Thank you very much for your time. And we can now go around in the gallery. But don't follow me, it will provide
Thank you, Nicole and David. Thank you.
Thank you.
The link to the next room is actually just right next to the staircase. So it will lead us back to UCL where we would have the round table. See you guys there.
Exactly. See you beside the round table, just here.
I can go on
Just here. Hi, Melinda again.
Hi, Michelle. We're going back to UCL for the round table.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
All together.
Here we are.
Virtual tour.
Back in one piece and almost on time. So we will have the round table inside the white space so that we ensure we're close enough with each other. So follow me.
Hello. Let's go inside the white space. Here we are.
So hello, thank you everybody for sticking to the end, and I'm so glad that we didn't lose anyone.
Yes. We have all the people. Yeah, 15. Perfect.
And thank you to all of our guests who contributed their time and effort and sharing with us their interesting investigation in education and also in visual technologies. So now we will have 20 to 30 minutes in discussing and asking each other questions.
Yes, here you are free to suggest everything or whatever you have in your minds according to all the first round of presentations that we had minutes ago.
Yes, maybe I have a few questions of my own that I'm interested. Maybe I can start with first. So most of us probably come from a more traditional type of institutional environment when we did our bachelor, master, and now we're teaching, for instance, back in Hong Kong when we are progressing from a traditional means of architectural education into the more digital space. Can you share with us some challenges into this progression, any of our guests, and what can we learn from your experience and the process? Anyone? Adam, maybe?
Hi. Okay. I think, it's important to acknowledge the differences between different communities. And although here this is kind of an international roundtable and people are in Europe and in Hong Kong and elsewhere, the culture of the students as they come in is radically different. And although I may have been educated in Canada, where certain things are emphasized, maybe criticality, design thinking, craftsmanship, emphasis on rigor, I have found that is something that isn't necessarily natural to the students that I'm encountering, for example. So, and I know that's a very different story over at UCL or in London, where you can advance very quickly in a very different and I almost want to say more mature way. So I think that there is actually a huge disparity internationally in terms of students and teaching in their relationship to technology that as an instructor I've had to adapt to, and it takes a while. Actually, it's not something you learn in the first year. And if you talk to first-year instructors who are coming here, there is a bit of a cultural adjustment as well that has to go on. And I think you'll see that firsthand soon.
Cool. Do you think we'll be able to design without technology?
Absolutely not. No. My attitude towards technology is that everything is technology. Even your hand is a piece of technology, and the pencil is technology. But I sincerely believe that, and I think this might be a point of contention in this group, is that you need to learn to walk before you can run. And it's very important that we emphasize literacy, digital literacy, but also analog literacy before that. And I don't just say that because I have an analog undergrad in architecture and then a ridiculously digital experience afterwards. But that I think that forms the basis for those things as an interface and a substrate for more advanced modeling, I think is the right word. If architecture is about modeling, then we want to understand how to penetrate it in historical ways, in the traditional ways, but also simultaneously with programming and iterative and customizable and repetitive, etc. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Well, that's a very progressive thought. I mean, we also have some students here, and it will be interesting to hear their thoughts, and also students who are studying at the Bartlett, because when we're progressing into a digital space, like I myself been through this transition, we often feel insecure, and then we always feel like we're imposters because we don't know, we're not engineers, we're not exactly like product designers, we're not exactly policy designers, we're not exactly scripters. And some students even ask me if they're not scripting from scratch, how would they be able to understand the algorithm? So maybe we can also hear it from some other guests in what they think the importance of collaboration is in this process, and should architect be able to do everything, or what do you think education should focus on in this case?
Or maybe as architects, we are mediators between all these other aspects in the design process overall in this digital era in which we are living, in this, as well in this post-pandemic context with all these digital tools and digital VR context.
Yeah, kind of agree on that. Like even if you don't need to do all the tools, but maybe an awareness of what these tools do. I think that would be important. Like if you need to create a dialogue with an engineer or dialogue with a consultant, you would need to have an understanding of what the first principles are, at least. Then you'll be able to like get the most of your consultant or your engineer. And that's what like I felt like when we are working on projects within the office, that's kind of the learning we try to get. And in our teachings as well, we try to promote as much as possible like the understanding of the first principles. Even if you're using someone else's tool, there's always literature behind it to understand what the tool is doing. So reading up on and understanding what the tool does, I think, forms a backbone. Similar to what Adam was mentioning, you need to learn how to walk before you run, but the walking also includes knowing the history and understanding the first principles.
You know,
yeah, sorry.
I think that for everyone to be included in this kind of paradigm shift of digitization, and I don't think and it's not exclusive to architecture, but it's every field, whether it's psychology or geography or fine art. Everyone needs to get on board with literacy, and it would be immensely difficult for any student to attempt a degree in something without understanding the language that they're speaking in as well. You know, if I have students who can't speak English, it's nearly impossible for me to communicate with them. And I think more broadly, life is moving towards digital everything. And I don't think it's fair to simply penetrate that space as an end user alone. I think it's one of the reasons why architecture is at serious risk of becoming obsolete, is that people are refusing to become literate and code. And I mean, it shouldn't be coding. It should just be called having the capacity to engage and edit and create with a language that uses computers. So I really worry about that, because it's incredible to see how much work someone will put into avoiding learning something so simple out of fear, basically. It's pretty profound and worrying to me.
I see. So
like
what I'm getting... Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes.
I want just to just ask a couple of questions. When we say language and architecture, what does that really mean? What is our language? That could be one of the questions that we should ask ourselves. And probably using this digital age or this, let's say, easy accessibility to different schools of architecture all over the world, it's a good opportunity to start asking ourselves the fundamental questions in architecture. And probably also remove some of the confusions that have been kind of piling up in architecture for the past probably century. So and to say that the digital age is the only medium to create architecture, that would be an overstatement. For I think architecture then wouldn't have been possible before. And that would have been a mistake, I would say. So to the language of architecture, I see there is a lot of confusions around that. But of course, if we consider this kind of technology as a good tool to communicate globally, instead of having kind of very centralized or enclosed small, let's say, group of people who have access to a certain knowledge of architecture, that is a huge advantage. And probably it is now the stage actually to really touch on the fundamentals of architecture, and even also destroy the dogma around why architecture is so undefinable that we have learned through school, I would say. So that would be my opinion on the matter.
Do you really think we can discuss architecture as a concept that's detached from the rest of the world, or digital as a context? Or
well, the thing is, if we can think of if there is an essence of architecture that is beside the technology, because definitely architecture was possible before our engineering has been so advanced. So whether the architecture is being done across planetary or in your backyard, it still holds some essence. There's the red thread that connects it, makes it architecture. So if we can kind of touch on that essence, try to understand what it is, and even if there is no essence, it's good to know why there is no essence. That's also knowledge. That's also a form of knowledge. So if there's a sense of architecture per se, that would mean, or very characteristic to architecture, apart from the rest of the disciplines, that means it's time to start finding it out. Because I have been around and I have seen different schools of thoughts in architecture, and they vary also sometimes a lot. But I think there is something out there that's still not yet discussed. I thought actually that the more I recognized more of these schools, the more confusions are surrounding this topic. So it's time probably to kind of tackle this house of cards and try to find the foundation of what makes architecture what it is. I don't know yet answers or not even the questions entirely, but I can see there's something out there that is still not investigated, and I can see also, or I can imagine that architecture is so young that it's still at the outset of its time. So that's what I think.
Awesome. I feel like the materiality of architecture itself and the scale of the problem of a building is perhaps too big, especially in the time of having cities and urban context, that it's always going to be a problem that's more centralized. In the sense we need collective effort. We need more than one people to build a tower. And for that reason, we must collaborate. And if we want this problem to be scalable, then it would mean that we have to communicate globally. And that with this context, it's pretty hard for us to be detached from telecommunication technologies, right? Unless we're all going back to the village.
Of course, we can imagine ourselves as building experts. We can imagine ourselves as engineers sometimes, or fantasize to be computer scientists, or etc. So, but is there something characteristics about what we do that separates us, or that actually is the seed of what we do, and then what should be actually communicatable? So, regardless how important the building expert is to the architecture, but that does not necessarily mean that they should kind of dictate necessarily what goes in the architecture per se. So it's absolutely, at the end of the day, if we're talking of a building, it should hold, etc., and so forth. But there is, I feel there is something actually very recognizable through the history of architecture that makes it one thing, that has been possible before, and with simple tooling. So yeah. We have to communicate eventually, of course, but what are we communicating is kind of a yet not easily recognizable. That's what I'm noticing, and the more I go through the theories, the more confusions I get, and some at some point we need to, I think, concretize some of the aspects that are essential and fundamental and to architecture that's still not fully investigated. There is that dogma that I learned in school that architecture has no one single definition. That's true, but so far what I learned what architecture not. But I kind of missed the course on what architecture is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Like I would think,
yeah,
no one is questioning the relevance of history, right? Like it's always good to understand history, but what digital tools are doing is making things which were accessible previously and took a lot of time to do of the master builders like Gaudi and Freyato. The digital tools is currently helping to reach a lot of architects now. A lot of designers can use the same technologies and same ideas which were based on historical methods, but it has made it more accessible and usable for other designers to investigate in. So like, yeah, you need to build on top of history, that's for sure, but I wouldn't say like you will need technology to aid in it. To make it more accessible to more people, you would need technology. And I always considered like an architect to be like one who creates spaces and social scenes for interaction between people. And to make this happen, we need to make a building or like predominantly it was a building previously, but now it can be also digital spaces.
Yeah.
See, I have always thought that it was about developing a sense of, let's say in students, a sense of design identity and a sense of self, which really is the same thing as your identity in the end. Once you go through it for enough years and have failed and tried enough times. And I wonder, and I think this is the pervasive question for me, is if digital technology is helping to create better original work, or if it's helping to reiterate what already has been done. And I think that is the tough question for me. And I think the answer is probably a bit of both. But I think that those fundamental questions should have been the same ones that everyone was asking, whether it was 50 years ago or 20 years ago or now. Is your work rigorous, and is it original? And I don't think that digital technology can help to answer those questions any more than it ever did or may ever will. Maybe.
Yes, please. Someone wish to.
Yeah, digital technologies, I believe, are an augmentation for the designer. They're not going to replace the designer. It is just an augmentation. So it is, in that sense, if you're used to drawing with a pen, computation or computer is an equivalent to a pen. What you do with it is the creativity, and that is what will lead to original things, not the tool itself.
Right. So how do we teach that part and not the tool part? The tools will come and go, hopefully, and they'll get better and more efficient. But I think the point is about the rigorous nature of whatever the investigation is, whether it's a ruler and a pen, or a Wallacé or any other, I don't know, whatever it could be. And I think we are arriving in a time period where we can double back to those questions of originality and creativity and sense of identity and building up of confidence. Yeah.
I mean, maybe we can also include others in this conversation, like Dario, Lucia, Cornell, and Michelle, if you have any thoughts. I mean, this morning, Professor Mario gave us a beautiful history of digital theory that take us today. So after learning from history, knowing where we stand, where do you think the future will go with this education format of the digital? How can it be integrated with the physical, etc.?
Yes, and at the same time, how we are redefining the models of living at the end. Because, well, just an example, trying to following this thread of what we are doing now as architects. Now, in this roundtable, we designed several locations, scenarios that at the end are not a part of the process of design, are at the end of something. So now we are architects not just in the real world. We are real architects in the digital era, in the digital world, in the VR environment. So what means at the end? It's a good question. Maybe we are just designing more things that at the end are opening more windows to our profession. We are designers of VR environments, for instance.
For instance. Dario and Lucia?
Yes, no, I was thinking that it's true that nowadays we actually design through information, and that's through digital information. Through information we have always designed or has been related to that, but there is this new digital information occupying or transforming all our surroundings in this kind of informational media. So I think that we need to consider not just how to become literate in all these technologies and how to practically use them. So not just becoming users of them, but actually understand how they are articulated, like how is the programming within any kind of BIM technology or even this virtual space. How is the programming of these tools creating what's possible within architecture? And that relates also to a critical understanding of how information works in terms of in architectural terms. So I think it's not just about becoming used to use these tools, but actually critically approach them, understand how they are made, how they shape our practices, and this kind of a more theoretical or critical approach, I think it is often left out because yes, sometimes like all the field of critical theory and all this area has been more reluctant and more like, okay, I don't want to know anything about technology because technology is bad per itself. So I think it's important to overcome this, and we are seeing that in critical code studies, in critical practices that are starting to do that. So I don't know if it adds much, but I think it's important that we bring in this criticality to the tools, to how we use them, how they create what's possible and what's not, and not just accept a user level approach to all of them.
Yeah. Actually, when you were speaking about this, it reminded me of something that Adam also said earlier, that when they organized the Cadria conference, although it looks like it's just a virtual conference, but actually behind the scene, there are a lot of people working in the AV team, a lot of people working at the back end. And it's almost like without that amount of resources, human resources, monetary resources, it's almost impossible to have a hybrid educational format nowadays. Looking at the Deep City conference, looking at the setup, the amazing setup that you guys did, it almost feel the same. Like, if we're talking about decentralization, what do you think will be the prospect that any individual can actually have set up like that for the future of education?
Well, that's in fact one of the things that we are working now, is to try to create this tool as a plug and play. Like, you can actually create your own database and create your own connections, and with a series of tutorials allowing for a kind of light version, where through webcams, smartphones, and things that we have, all of us in our schools, in our offices, that we can create this kind of multi-viewpoint connection through this platform. So that's what we are trying to achieve, because really the thanks to our computer engineer, the working of the platform within itself, it's super intuitive and doesn't require like an expert mode to get into it. So I think that's what we should, what we wanted also to do since the start, no? That do-it-yourself feeling that we think has led to many interesting political projects linked to technology, to bring it also within the platform.
Exactly, but perhaps this raises also the question of, I guess, you know, the status of these tools within a broader ecology and an environment of digital platforms, digital tools, you know, proprietary systems, open source tools, etc., because and perhaps this is also a realm where architects and urbanists and urban planners, why not, should also pronounce themselves slightly, because these technologies do create barriers, as well as they tend to or aim at overcoming or you know, helping to overcome such barriers. But at the same time, you know, the digital divide is there. There's this question of literacy was evoked previously, and it's not just only about you know, knowing how to code or not, but it also has to do with access to very basic units and infrastructure. And perhaps this is also a relevant question here. To what extent do we consider certain things essential infrastructure for societal communication? And to what extent, as architects, can we think and facilitate an access and interaction that is just and fair for our societies? You know, because yeah, I think this is also a reflection that should accompany this kind of critical approaches that Lucia was mentioning before, because it is within this context that we operate at the end. And to me, this goes a little bit perhaps beyond these questions of the essence of architecture, which for sure are very interesting, but often the essence, you know, the answer to these questions, you always sometimes understand them better when you are just progressing and looking beyond the limitation of a particular disciplinary field, because those things tend to change with time. We know that. Yeah, just sharing with you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're bringing out an important point of how digital literacy is actually helping in social mobility, no matter which discipline we're in. And yeah, so does any one of our guests have something that they wish to add before we're running out of time?
Yes, we are reaching 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Maybe one
like
last point.
there's some interest in the.
Yes, please. Oh,
Yeah,
maybe David and then
Mike. Michi.
Okay, so I'll try to be quick. Just I think that's something, as Provides pointed out, that is really clear in this conversation is the need for literacy, and this reminds me like a lot about the work of the Laboria Cubonics collective and their Xenofeminist manifesto, which I think if we apply to architecture, if we read it through the lenses of an architect, it's easy. It's like a call to arms to literacy, and especially to not to wait to be accepted or not to wait to be to receive the tools from, especially in this case, big tech companies. So I think that something that is really important, besides the literacy, is not being afraid to produce. And this has to do a little bit with what Adam was brought up early, which is like not being afraid of producing your own tools and being able to, and this is where literacy comes in, being able to produce the tools that you need. It might be simple, whatever programming computational tool that you might need. So I think that literacy also goes in with this DIY mentality that was also brought up. And I think that our education needs to be subversive in this sense as well. And I think this is like a good way to try to understand technology as a tool, and also as a medium that we can use at any time to our own and our, I mean, a community, our own best interest to reach our collective objective. So I think there's a lot of power in there, and yeah, I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, I agree. It's also about abusing tools or making tools do things that they are maybe not designed for, right? I mean, I think looking at code and algorithms and technology as just another pen, I think there's a very different way in which authorship is shared, I guess, through this computational medium, right? There is somebody that explicitly programmed a certain tool with a certain intent, right? So obviously you could say the same of a pen, right? And I'm also questioning like how far does literacy need to go? Like, I mean, all these tools, I mean, they are built upon other tools, built upon other hardware, right? So I think you need to understand the tool enough to make it do what you want to do somehow, right? So I don't think this literacy is sort of an absolute thing. It's just how literate do I need to be? How illiterate can I be in a certain thing and still use it to whatever purpose I want from a certain. So I totally agree that it's also about this critical reading of the technology and how it is presented to us.
Yeah, actually, what Cornell and David was talking about, it reminded me, you know, as Baha was questioning what is architecture, and as we are progressing into the age of artificial intelligence, does our tool have to understand what is architecture before we can collaborate with our tools into producing architecture? Then I think the value of actually looking into the essence of a discipline or into a subject is that for the communication, not just between humans, but also between humans and machines. So if we understand the units of architecture, can we compute it? Can we program it? That goes back to like shape grammar and such.
Yeah, but you could reverse the question as well, like with these neural networks. I mean, how much do we need to understand how that artificial intelligence came up with a certain solution, right? There is a certain limit to kind of, I mean, obviously you need to be literate in how to use it and where the biases is and how it's trained and whatnot. But do you need to be literate to the level that you understand how it actually comes to a certain conclusion? I don't think so. So that, again, there's this kind of negotiation, I guess, to how much do you want to know and need to know.
I think it depends.
That would be a specialization, right? Like if you want, like you will understand the workings of the neural net if you want to investigate further and like be creative about it. But if you want to see what the tool is doing, then you don't need to know what the back end of it. But if you want to modify things and upgrade things, I think there is like a base level of like an information block probably which is required. And on top of it, you can add things, or you can just play around with it and understand and be creative in the limited use the existing tool does. But if you want to improve it and make it specific to your needs, then you need to understand the back end of it as well.
I think that a couple words come to mind. The first one is virtuosity. And I think that may be one of the important things to think about in the context of literacy, because do we as architects want to become experts at something, or do we want to just learn a little bit and make a building from that little piece of knowledge? And I guess it depends on the kind of architect you want to be, and I know both versions of it. But I often keep trying to translate this conversation out of architecture and into other fields like music, for example, or cooking or something like that. How important is it that you can know your ingredients? And the answer is there is no end to how many details you can know about the origins of the things you're working with, or you could just get a plate and put an apple on it. Or you could know everything about where it came from and the seasons and the details. And that is essentially describing knowledge and information, and what you do with it is a kind of virtuosity. So us as tool makers and tool users is going to be this never-ending question that identifies us as architects. Are we just end users, or are we makers of new modeling and building tools? Yes, we're definitely, but that's the game of capital A and not.
Yeah, that's the interesting point, right? Like as architects now, we can make a choice on which end where we want to be, and it's opening up a lot of different avenues. Like a lot of our students get into web developers or web developing, or some are getting into generating games and things like this. So this like the knowledge of being an architect actually helps in all of these industries as well. If you're interested on that aspect, you can as well tap into it. But if you're interested on more known ways of being an architect, which is to design buildings, then there are other ways to explore that as well. So I think in that sense, like technology is bringing a lot of opportunities into the field and giving us a diverse range of options as an architect to choose your interest in.
Yeah, I think this conversation actually reminded me of the last chapter of Professor Mario's book, Second Digital Turn, where he was saying that why do we have to think anymore? We just ask the crowd, that's open source. Or why do we even have to think critically? We can just brute force trial and error with neural networks that is in contrast to a traditional way of scientific investigation. But then he ended with saying that, but maybe we should leave computers to do what they do best and what humans to do what they do best, which is to think critically. So I think that is a pretty nice close maybe to this conversation. But before that, maybe we can ask if any last questions, or if students wish to be part of this conversation before we end it.
Yes. And what about this format, for instance? Do you think that this is interesting? How it is a way of interaction instead of just the classic Zoom?
Yeah. What do you think about this? I mean, anyone can give feedback. What do you think about this format? It's growing on you.
Yeah, it's interesting in the sense that you're able to see others in the space. Like that's interesting. But I think what I find odd is that I don't see myself. So
yeah, and no facial expressions of the others as well, which is also a bit odd.
Maybe we should all be using your headsets.
Yeah.
It should be like
right,
the first shooter games you had, right? Like the you see like part of the body.
Yeah, I think once we like really dive in it and not be scared of it, it's growing on me too. So, well, thank you everybody. Thank you for your time. We're overrunning, so thank you for staying so late. And see you in the next event. The next event will be on the 24th of September. We will do better with the setup. And thank you so much, everybody. Alberto?
Yes, I think for us, this has been a quite precious opportunity because all we are learning about the experience of the others. So in this case, okay, this 3D VR format, I think is the beginning for something more. So let's be in touch because we want to do more things soon during the end of September. Hopefully, maybe we can still be in touch for more interesting initiatives like this one. So I hope you enjoyed all this time with us. Let's be in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a selfie before we leave. The camera is here. The camera is here. Look this way. Yeah. Like as if we're in a real physical conference. So.
There.
Say cheese.
All right. 3, 2, 1, and cheese. Okay.
The funny thing is, I'm laughing.
I'm really
my screen.
So no one's gonna see. Oh, I love this picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please share it, provides. Please share it.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, everybody. And
maybe you can take another one.
Oh, another one. Okay. Awesome.
It's pioneering. It's like gonna be done. It's gonna go down in history.
I hope this on the YouTube channel. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. This was really nice experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.